Hello everyone. As said, I'm Taavi. I must apologize, I have 134 slides, so I'll be quick. Okay, I'm Taavi, as discussed, and as you know probably. I'm running company startup called Salv, and looking at my age, you can assume that it's not the first startup where I'm working, and I just wanted to share some learnings from the previous startups, where I saw at least one actually, I saw two global industry changes, and I just want to tell the story like what we can learn from these changes in our space. So if you think about back that phone calls used to be expensive, complicated, local, time-consuming to set up and used only when necessary, like long time ago. But Skype over the 15 years has made the calls to become free, simple for all, global by default, instant, and used as often as we want. It has happened quite quickly, this kind of revolution. As tiny startup completely changed the global industry. And then I joined another company which delivered another global revolution, which is closer to us. So the money transfers used to be expensive, complicated, local, time-consuming to set up, and used only when necessary again. And this sounds quite familiar, I think, to you also. So again, TransferWise and other companies over only 9 years made money transfers nearly free, simple for all, global, instant, and money without borders. And again, another startup that's completely changing the global industry in our days. And now let's talk about the industry. We all know needs a global shift as well, as we're working in the payment space. So my life dream has always been to follow loads of rules. That's why I joined the compliance industry. That's actually, no one has said that, never, I think. And that's like, if you think about your careers, like people are not willing to follow the strict rules. We want to create something new, we want to be useful, or we want our job to be meaningful. So if you think about, or if you read this definition of the compliance, which as it's defined in the books, it's even very hard for me to read, pronounce these strange names, but if you try to understand what does it mean, it's even really hard to follow the idea of the compliance. It's used everywhere, but actually what it means. But if you translate it into simpler English, then it's like, it means the giving up or giving in or agreeing with everything to a system that everyone feels helpless to stop. So that's ultimately the meaning of the compliance as it is defined. And when we talk about AML, then the first AML compliance laws were born in the 1930s. Their mission in era of the mafia and gangsters was clear: to stop crime, to stop criminals, to protect vulnerable. But today we are little lost, or maybe completely lost. Now we have this compliance Ferris wheel. If you think about, there are new regulations added on the country level. Banks struggle to comply. Auditors then check and verify us. Technology changes again, and banks struggle to adapt with the existing compliance rules, and the banks hire more people, and it goes into cycle because like there is new AML directive number 5 coming out, and there is number 6 coming out, and number 7, and all this stuff happens over and over again. So like 100 years after AML laws started, are we actually fulfilling that original mission that was defined back then? And the answer is almost no, because less than 1% of laundered criminal proceeds are seized and are detected actually. That's based on the global studies. And it's estimated that actually the dirty money that's detected is about 0.2% that's actually coming out through this compliance cycle. Just imagine, like, what if there were like 100 thieves in your neighborhood, and the police would put only one of them for good, and 99 of them would be still there. Would you feel safe with this kind of situation or environment? So what if in what other industries 1% completion rate good enough? Think about payments, like if your customer's payment success, like payments completion rate would be 1%, or if your sales success would be 1%, it would be pretty bad situation. But in the compliance and AML world, that's exactly where we are at the moment. and the damage is worse than we realize actually. Just to think about 1 week, FCA, the UK regulator, has estimated how much damage the money laundering and crime is causing in 7 days. So over like $6 billion will be generated through the sale of illicit drugs, and over 70 million will be raised to finance terrorism, and an estimated like more than 15,000 people will be trafficked into slavery worldwide in our days, or like a total more than 300 African elephants will be killed for their ivory, or 30 billion will be laundered through the global financial system. 30 billion, like how many zeros there are? Like, okay, I can calculate, but it's still quite many, too many. And while hundreds of millions will be spent by financial institutions trying to prevent all of it, so companies are investing into the compliance cycle and over again. So, and this only in like 7 days in a year. So if you multiply by the annual number of weeks, it's pretty bad, the situation. So the whole system is broken. Like companies are spending huge fortunes to be compliant and so-called to fight the money laundering, but in real life, these numbers that we just went through show that it's like absolutely useless, the investment. Like 12 out of 50. That's the number of total world biggest banks. Last year, only 1 out of 4 got some kind of fine because of not being compliant with the AML regulations. So these are the biggest banks of the world. I'm not talking about all the banks, but every 4th bank has screwed up something. And here are just a few headlines. Like here in Baltics, you are pretty familiar with them, but it's coming from the last couple of months only. And it's like every week I keep monitoring news, and there are new and new troubles coming out. And the thing is that also it's not about regulators and governments that are watching after payment institutions and banks, but actually the shareholders, people who are buying and selling shares, have voted also. Publicity has changed, and like that's, I think, Danske Bank, whose share dropped 60% or 70% after the negative AML news came out. The same happened with the Swed, and that's completely different from the regulators like fines and like court cases, because it was quite neutral. But this is actually something which is impacting companies much more, and it's coming from us, from the shareholders. But today, consumers are judging on us, and by how well we can protect them, and the media holds us accountable. They like this kind of news, based on how well we stop crime. Actually, not about compliance. But if we really want to beat criminals, we'll need a whole new mindset, where we move from passive compliance into like proactive crime fighting, and that's a mental shift that we need to do now. And yeah, changing mentally and technically this approach isn't easy task, but what I'm saying is that making a global change is rarely easy. So that's really motivating for people who work in this industry to change it around. So, but the question is, how do we become proactive crime fighters here? We need to think more like criminals, and I've seen people who are able to think like criminals, and they're super effective in this crime fighting mission. So I just wanted to explain you like 5 different criminal mindsets or thinking models which have helped us to change or build our technology and actually change the mentality of the people. So let's talk about technology, adaptability, speed, collaboration, and the end goal or grand goal that people have. And I'm going through these mindsets through 3 different roles, or from 3 different aspects. Like there are criminals, the actual people who are laundering money. There are compliance people who are like working in governments or in the banks, following what has been told to them. And then there are crime fighters, like the true mission of people who are fighting successfully against the money laundering or fraud or other types of the crime. So when we think about technology, then criminals use the latest technology almost always. They're really fast adapters and early adapters. If you think about, there was one example in South Korea where one website which was selling children for abuse or some child workforce, and they were active quite many years, And why they weren't detected was that they were using the criminals who were running this site and selling this keys. They were using blockchain technology based payment methods. I'm not saying that blockchain is bad, but I'm just saying how quickly they adapted to it. And if you think about changes or new technologies which are coming into play now, like all the faster payments, all the API integrations, e-wallets, then you can only guess like how early adapters the criminals are on these platforms. When we think about compliance, then these people like to use what they already know. I've heard from many banks that the technologies that they're currently using for the so-called crime fighting in real life being compliance, these are mainly used because the regulators and supervisors know these names. These are really old names. They have been there for tens of years. No one else likes these products because they're super slow, super unflexible, but as regulators and compliance people like them because these are well-known brands and they tend to like trust these brands, then they stick to where they are. But the crime fighters use platforms that adapt and that can change. So in our case, like we're building new technologies from scratch which are able to change quickly the rules and the topologies of the monitoring systems. Like we're constantly searching for new information data exchange platforms, like which allow banks to exchange information with each other. We're looking to build new like AML libraries which allow experts to share their knowledge among themselves. So that's actually needed constant improvement of technologies in order to beat these criminals. So that's one dimension. The other mindset, how much adaptability or how adaptive people are. If you think about criminals, then they test to find what works. Like if these people who are selling their money laundering as a service to their criminals customers, they're constantly trying to figure out what are the channels or what are the assets or what are the institutions they should use in order to pass through the controls. Maybe they need to buy some gold and deliver it to Dubai. Maybe they need to buy some real estate. Maybe they need to buy some blockchain technology assets. Maybe they just transfer money over the bank accounts. They constantly test, and if they fail, then they use another technology, and it's like super fast. Whereas like compliance people trust in their years of experience. There was one interesting article which said that like back in 1950, globally there was about 10,000 pages of the compliance documents or AML compliance worldwide was written down in 10,000 pages, but now it's 200,000 pages of like materials globally, which are being used to write down the AML law. So there are more and more requirements and more like guidance and restriction coming on. So it's like very static. Like with every this new directive which is coming out, they're not replacing the old systems or old requirements that don't work, but they just add another layers on top of the previous requirements, which is like really static. But again, like the crime fighters use like they are changing constantly their approach. Like me as a mathematician, I'm like if I know that there is something I want to achieve as an end goal, like I want to find the criminals or want to like reduce the criminal funds which are moving around, then whatever is the formula or whatever is the model or like a function that I would need to use, I will use that. Like I try if machine learning doesn't work, I use some like strict knowledge-based learning. If this doesn't work, maybe there is some artificial intelligence coming in. Maybe if this doesn't work, we use some graphing. So it's always constantly testing the new approaches, how to find the criminals from this huge system. So again, there's a different mindset between the criminals or the crime fighters and the compliance people. Next thing is speed. Criminals prioritize speed because they know that if they hold their money in one, like if they have a huge bag of cash somewhere in the garage or like tens of millions in one bank account, they know that sooner or later police will come after them. So they need to move it really fast. So that's why again, like they probably appreciate a lot these faster payments. They appreciate a lot all the digital wallets because it's near to real time, and they know that catchers cannot follow them. Whereas in the compliance people, they tend to prioritize the process itself, showing. There was another nice story. One really wealthy businessman from America who later became a politician of America was taking loans and debt from Deutsche Bank, and he was taking it from multiple units or subunits of Deutsche Bank, and his personal credit rating or credit risk didn't go up because he took it so fast that this data about loans didn't move between the entities of the Deutsche Bank. So in the end, it was millions and millions or tens of millions of money that he took out from multiple different units, and in the end, when Deutsche Bank found and they were able to aggregate this data together, then they realized how badly they were doing actually, and the risk of this guy went up. Now he's still president of America. And the crime fighters again prioritize the speed. Today we're in the luxury situation where we can use super good technologies like baseline technologies which help to increase the speed of the monitoring systems. Like every day people are using, and we're using also the Amazon cloud services or Google cloud services, where it's really trivial to add more machines for the parallel calculation, which means that I think Denise gave a talk before that if transactions need, in the faster payments, banks need to process transactions in 20 seconds, and someone asked how can they handle the AML requirements and AML controls in these circumstances, because sometimes it takes half an hour, sometimes it takes maybe a day to calculate, then my answer is that actually these technologies are already out there, and people are using those to make a really fast checks and decisions, and also changing the rules and adapting the knowledge. It's some old players in the compliance world, they're changing their rules in a couple of months, whereas actually you can do it in hours or tens of minutes. The next part, which is really key, is collaboration between the different players in the market. So criminals use their vast networks to commit crime. I've seen in dark web people who are attacking some companies. I used to work in TransferWise, and when TransferWise was under attack, then in dark web we saw how much the criminals were exchanging the information with each other, how to attack TransferWise, and of course we were able to learn from that, but how to protect us, but also how much criminals are collaborating. Whereas in banks, especially, people are so stuck with their own data sets, they're afraid to share data with each other. Of course, there are GDPR requirements, there are Bank Secrecy Acts, but actually AML laws allow and motivate us to share information between different entities. But today it's very rare case. And again, crime fighters help to band together the industry knowledge against crime. As I mentioned, there are privacy enhancing technologies which work partially as decentralized networks, which are much more secure than the bank's own internal systems, because decentralized data takes the security one level, or it's tenfold more secure than the current standards. And again, sharing this information means that each entity or each company doesn't need to work with a single puzzle piece and trying to guess what's the overall picture around it, but actually these puzzle pieces are collected together across multiple players, and it provides new knowledge. And the final one, the end goal of different players, the criminals are laser focused on the laundering the money. They want to earn money and they want to get it through the systems. Whereas people in the compliance, they need to do their work from 9 to 5. They need to fill all the checkboxes. They need to show that they are good complying with regulations, but their mission is not to stop crime. And again, crime fighters are actually laser focused on stopping money laundering. Of course, they know that they need to be compliant, but the main priority is still to fight the criminals. So technology, adaptability, speed, collaboration, and the end goal are the ones that actually matter quite a lot in this new era of the money laundering fighting. That's how we beat the bad guys that we see, and that's how we avoid being the next AML scandal. Without this change, we will fall again into the same trap. So let's remind ourselves of the original compliance mission. It's to stop crime is to stop criminals, protect the vulnerable. And we can't keep doing what we have been doing so far, because like it's all about restrictions, like don't onboard this customer, don't let this transaction to go through. But we should like start thinking what we can start doing, and we can start limiting the criminal money. We can start improving our controls. And the main goal can no longer be compliance. It needs to be fighting financial crime. So the ferry wheel still goes on today over and over again. But if you think about Skype and TransferWise and other similar companies who have brought in the real revolution in the market, that's something that crime fighters will do in next 10 years as well. So let's stop being passive, compliant spectators. Instead, let's jump into the ring as an active crime fighters. So, and together, I really believe that we can bring in this global change. Thank you.
Thank you for presentation. So, a few questions. One very practical. So, imagine we open up a new TransferWise clone tomorrow without any crime fighting, obviously. So what to expect? What would be the typical attack we would get first?
Actually, the luxury is that, or problem is that you don't see this attack immediately, because if the companies are small, then criminals don't want to launder the money through them, because it will become visible. If someone has 100 customers and like 50 of them start delivering huge amount of money, it's very transparent. So they wait until this new company gets big enough, and then they attack. They know that the onboarding isn't as strong as for the banks, KYC isn't as strong as banks, and they know that transactions are super fast in real time, so all the money coming from east or from south or wherever is going through the system really easily. And I've seen, like if you think about neobanks who are not contributing enough into crime fighting, you can see their names in the news from last year. Someone's getting sacked, someone is like being investigated. So again, that's the problem or symptom of the fact that people are not prioritizing this enough.
Okay, and the last question. So can you give more elaborate examples on what to do exactly to fight better, like more AML, less user experience, or vice versa? So what would you suggest?
It's a good question. Like more AML doesn't need to be less user experience. Like the more compliance, the worse user experience. But there is a triangle between regulations, crime fighting, and the customers. And my point is that the TransferWise, we did focus on our own internal data, not so much about what was actually told to us to do, but actually what we wanted to do with our data, using IP addresses, using all the log information, contacts between the people, links. And you have actually really rich data set that you can use to build more smarter models than actually required. And these models are more accurate, they impact your customers less, and they impact criminals more. And that's actually, everyone can do themselves also, but that's the technology that we're building at Salv for the people who cannot do themselves.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's my present.
Thank you.